Hey, what's up, guys? Got a quick news update for you today. We're going to talk about Trump because a lot of you have been asking me about President Trump's recent tweets that sent the stock market falling, saying that there's not going to be a stimulus until after the election. Then he added some more tweets a little bit later on in the day on kind of Tuesday night, sent the market kind of recovering a little bit, looking at futures. So we're going to talk about all of that and what I think it means for the economy going forward. We'll also talk about House Democrats talking about breaking up big tech, and so what that might mean for those companies and those stocks. I'll share my thoughts on that as well. And of course, we'll talk about the stock market, what all of this means for the stock. But this is, after all, a stock market channel. So I'll share my thoughts on where I think we're kind of going here in the short to medium term and what I'm personally doing myself about it. So should be a lot of fun. Make sure you hit the like button if you enjoy this quick update. And we got a lot to cover, so let's just dive right in. Okay, so all the drama started when President Trump once again sent out a tweet that rocked the stock market, this time saying Nancy Pelosi is asking for $2.4 trillion to bail out poorly run, high crime Democrat states, money that is in no way related to the pepperoni. We made a very generous offer of $1.6 trillion, and as usual, she is not negotiating in good faith. I am rejecting their request and looking to the future of our country. I have instructed my representatives to stop negotiating until after the election, when immediately after I win, we will pass a major stimulus bill that focuses on hardworking Americans and small businesses. And then a little bit down the lines, he said the stock market is at record levels. Jobs and unemployment also coming back in record numbers. We are leading the world in economic recovery, and the best is yet to come. Now, you might recall that in a previous video, we actually covered the Democrats' bill when it was first announced as the HEROES Act, and at that time, the bill was worth a whopping $3 trillion back in, I think this was in May. For reference, the first CARES Act from back in March, that was famous for giving all legal residents a stimulus check of $1,200 or more, and that bill was worth a record-breaking $2 trillion at that time. So the new HEROES Act was going to surpass that by another $1 trillion. And I think most people felt that this might be too much spending, especially more fiscally conservative Republicans, and negotiations have been going on ever since between the two sides. Now, back then, Republicans wanted to spend a smaller amount at around $1 trillion, which was about a third of what the Democrats wanted or were asking for. Well, fast forward to today, and Democrats are now willing to go down to about $2.4 trillion, according to what Trump said, while Republicans have agreed to go up to $1.6 trillion. So both sides negotiated away about $0.6 trillion in an effort to meet in the middle. Of course, the middle would actually be at around $2 trillion, so we're still about $0.4 trillion away on both sides. But as you just saw, Trump seems to feel that Republicans have gone high enough and that the bill gives too much money to areas that some feel don't deserve it. For example, and I know this is a heated political topic, so please don't shoot the messenger, but some of the arguments that some Republicans have brought up recently is that the bill would essentially use taxpayer money to give out stimulus checks to illegal immigrants, as well as provide protection from deportations and healthcare, while also bailing out poorly run Democrat states that were struggling even before the health crisis started, and on the dime of states that are run much better, which Trump would argue that the well-run states are Republican while the poorly run ones are Democrat. And again, I don't want to get political on here, but when looking at the top 10 states by debt, the top 5 are actually solidly blue, with California and New York at the very top there, although Texas is pretty high as well at number 6, and Ohio would be another solidly red state at number 10, but you get the idea. Anyway, the news of halting negotiations until the election was very surprising, to say the least, as Trump had just a few days prior tweeted that stimulus is not only wanted but also needed. Not to mention that unemployment is obviously still very high, with many businesses on the verge of bankruptcy. For example, airlines have already had to start laying people off, with American and United furloughing more than 32,000 employees recently and stating that they can only bring them back if another stimulus deal gets done. Meanwhile, Southwest recently called for major pay cuts in order to avoid the same fate for their own employees as well. And when looking at jobs, we've definitely made progress, but unemployment levels are still around double what they were even during the Great Recession. So I'm not really on board with anyone thinking that our economy is in such great shape. It's definitely making progress, but we're still under horrible conditions right now. As a result, though, the stock market did fall a bit on Tuesday, but it was even less than what it gained on Monday, and we're still positive over the past 5 days. So I think the bigger concern is, what does this lead into down the road rather than what just happened initially right now? Does a delay in stimulus cause us to go into possibly a double dip recession with a large market drop? Or will things stay relatively the same and the market just kind of shrugs it off, knowing that more money will eventually come? Well, heading back to Twitter for a second, Trump did add two more tweets about it later on Tuesday night, saying the House and Senate should immediately approve $25 billion for airline payroll support and $135 billion for Paycheck Protection Program for small business. Both of these will be fully paid for with unused money from the CARES Act. That's that first stimulus package that we had. And then he says, have this, well, like basically, we have this money, I will sign now. And then he tweeted again and he said, if I am sent a standalone bill for stimulus checks, $1,200, they will go out to our great people immediately. I am ready to sign right now. Are you listening, Nancy? Okay. All right. So I'll give my thoughts on all of this in just a second. We'll go into more depth on it. But before we do that, I just want to quickly mention the big tech issues, because as if all of this chaos wasn't enough, the Democrat-dominated House also published a nearly 450-page report on Tuesday detailing why they think Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Google should be under stricter overwatch for unfairly stifling some of their competition in favor of their own products or services, such as in, for example, Amazon's marketplace or Apple's App Store. And we know Apple has been dealing with that video game. What is it? Fortnite, I think. They've been having issues with that. Anyway, they even go as far as to say that the companies may need to be broken up into smaller companies that won't be able to benefit so easily from being under the same roof. And this is something that a lot of Republicans actually agree with too, since they're constantly dealing with censorship of conservative voices or opinions. So there's actually a lot of bipartisan support for limiting the power that these gigantic tech companies have, and also forcing them to be more transparent, especially with consumers' data and privacy. Although many Republicans feel that some of the report and suggestions from Democrats goes too far, so there would likely still need to be a ton of negotiations before anything drastic happens. That is, unless, of course, if Democrats manage to retain the House, take back the Senate, and also win the presidency, but who knows how likely it is for one party to get all of that. But then you're probably talking about these companies being forced to split up. But all the controversies were enough to send the giants falling on Tuesday when looking at their stocks. So Google dropped by about 2% on Tuesday. Facebook fell about the same amount. Apple dropped by closer to 3%. And then Amazon actually topped all of that at over 3%, about 3.1% themselves. Okay, so how do I feel about all of this? The stimulus stuff getting delayed, some big tech companies possibly getting broken up, or at the very least having some more oversight and restrictions. And what do I think it all means for the stock market, and what do I plan to do about it myself? Well, let's start with the stimulus stuff, because that seems to be what's on everybody's mind, and from what I can tell, what people are a little bit more concerned about. So with that, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I just really don't think it's that big of a deal. Now, let me backtrack already, because I can already feel the comments coming on saying that I don't care about innocent people, and that how could I not care about people that need the money and need the stimulus. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying objectively, looking at the stock market, and after all, this is a stock market investing channel, looking at the stock market and even looking at the economy, I really don't think it's that big of a deal, because I do believe that stimulus is coming, and I think it's coming pretty soon. And at the very least, I think it's coming very soon after the election. And I know there's a lot of people saying, well, Trump said that if he wins the election, so what happens if he doesn't win? And what happens if he doesn't want to put out stimulus? Look, we've been through this before with Trump. We know how this works. The past 2 years, we've seen this, where, with the whole China trade war, he would make a tweet where he would say, we're stopping negotiations with China, and then like the next day or next couple days, he'd say, oh, we're back on to negotiations with China and everything's going great, and the stock market would be a roller coaster. Stock market would plummet, then it would take off again. And these were all great buying opportunities. Every time the stock market went down, it was actually, I kind of liked it. And I'm not saying that I would take pleasure from people being unemployed and all that kind of stuff, but these type of things that happen with Trump when he kind of goes off on Twitter and then he backtracks, whatever, and it causes this volatility, usually it just leads to buying opportunities in the stock market. So I'm not personally too concerned about it. And I think, from looking at Trump, we already saw that he's already kind of backtracking. He's talking about using money that's left over from the CARES Act. He's talking about possibly getting stimulus checks out to people, saying that if that came to his desk, he would sign it immediately. So you can tell that he's already kind of backtracking a little bit. And personally, I think this is a really bad move for Trump politically. And I don't want to get political on here because this is not a political channel, but I think it's a bad move politically. I think the media is going to use this. It's like ammunition for the media to kind of attack him and say that he doesn't care about people and he cares more about the election. So I think it's going to kind of force Trump to backtrack a little bit. Meanwhile, I think Democrats are also going to want to get something done. So I think if anything, they'll probably come back to negotiate both sides. And if they don't, I do still think that something gets done very soon after the election. But at the worst kind of scenario, I think we're talking about maybe like a 1 month delay in terms of really big stimulus coming. Speaking of which, how do I feel about such big stimulus coming and what do I think is the right number and how much should we be spending? Well, fiscally, I'm a bit fiscally conservative, I guess you'd say, because I don't really agree with our solution being to just keep the economy shut down and just spending our way out of this, amounting enormous debts. And then in the future, what does that lead to? Because that could lead to hyperinflation. We might have to inflate our way out of our massive debts. So I'm not really on board with those concepts or those solutions. What I would prefer to see is we already know that a V shot is coming fairly soon. It should be coming very soon for the pepperoni. And I always say pepperoni, but coming for the pepperoni. And once that comes, I think that we'll be able to start opening up the economy a lot more. And we've already kind of started to, but things are at limited capacities and there's a lot of restrictions and things like that. But we start to open it in a more meaningful way, safely. Of course, we have to do this safely. And at the same time, I think there is going to be some stimulus coming in. I don't think it should be gigantic, like 3 trillion. We've already been spending trillions. I think we need to be careful with how much money we're spending. So I'm not on board with just overdoing it. And I know a lot of people think that we should just overdo it and just spend as much money as possible. I don't think we should do that. I think we should be strategic, be a lot more careful with how much we're spending. And I think, 2 trillion is kind of my max number. I don't think we should go above that. I don't think we need to be setting new records on how much money we're spending here. But, if we do spend around, so Republicans are at 1.6, Democrats are at 2.4. If we could meet at like 2 trillion, meet in the middle, I think that'd be a pretty good number. And that's huge, huge stimulus. So the way I see it, I think that a V shot is coming. I think the economy starts to open back up. And I think we get a massive stimulus package out to people that helps the economy, boosts the economy. And I think we continue to see this, whatever, people are calling it a V-shaped recovery. You want to call it a U-shaped recovery, whatever it is. But I think we continue on our path to recovery. So that's on the kind of more optimistic side. I know I'm being optimistic. I'm sorry, I'm a long-term investor. I like to be optimistic. When these type of short-term issues happen, I'm not someone who panics. I usually look at those for buying opportunities. And I really don't think that the market is going to sell off huge from this. But if it does, that'd be great. Valuations are already very high, in my opinion, and I think we could use a nice pullback. So if this turns into a bigger drop in the stock market, that'd be great. But for me, this is not a huge issue. If anything, I'm more focused on the election and how both sides want to run the economy, because we're going through a time where Republicans and Democrats are very kind of polar opposites in many ways, and in social issues and all kinds of stuff, but also in how they both plan to run the economy. So I'm focusing a little bit more on policy from both sides. And I feel, and I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I honestly feel like we haven't really heard a lot about policy, because every time that the media covers the election and talks about the two sides, they focus so much on social issues, but they never really talk about the economy. Or maybe they'll get someone to mention some kind of policy, but they never dig deep into the policy. And I'd like to know more about how the two sides plan on running the economy. That's what I'd like to learn more. And that's what I'm focused on a little bit more myself. So you guys will have to let me know if you agree, if you're kind of having similar thoughts as me, or if you completely disagree. Let me know in the comment section. That's totally fine too. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and hey, we can agree or we can disagree, and that's no problem. But for me personally, none of this stuff is a huge issue. It is an issue, but it's not a huge issue. It doesn't really change my long-term investing strategy. Now, the other thing that came up was the breakup of big tech, and that's another thing that I just don't think is that big of a deal. Now, if you're heavily invested in these companies, okay, fair enough. That is a pretty big deal. And for me, I'm invested pretty heavily in Amazon, so that is a big deal for me. But worst case scenario, say one of these companies gets broken up, is that such a huge issue? I mean, yeah, the stock would probably fall by quite a bit, but it would be a buying opportunity. These are companies that the assets that they own are so incredibly valuable that even if you split up these companies, there's still huge value in whatever is left there. And if you were to look at, say, for example, Amazon, what happens if you split up, say, the e-commerce side of Amazon, maybe Amazon Web Services, AWS? Anybody who's not invested in that company gets a great choice. Now, if you like just the e-commerce, you can have just that. If you like the profitability of AWS, maybe you want just that stock, maybe you want both stocks. I don't know, it's up to you, but it just gives us more choices as investors. So I'm not too concerned about this. And in the end, I think we're probably going to end up more likely with these companies just having more oversight and some larger restrictions. And I think I'm totally on board with that. I have no problem with that because I think these companies are a bit too big in my opinion, and I could see them using certain strategies or certain things that are a little shady to have an edge over competition. And not just that, but I personally have an issue with all the censorship that's going on, and I've dealt with that personally on this YouTube channel this past year. I can't believe how much censorship I've had to deal with on my channel. My channel is not even political. It's a stock market investing channel, and I've had to deal with so much censorship. So I think more oversight, more restrictions on these gigantic companies. And look, I know that people say, well, you should just, because we have a capitalist kind of mindset. Let everything just kind of run and free market and let these things run. And I'm a capitalist myself, but there is a point where these companies do get so gigantically massive that you do need to take a closer look at them, and you do need to have some oversight and some restrictions on these giant behemoths, because it does trickle down and affect how everything else runs. In my opinion, that's just my opinion. You're welcome to disagree with me, but that's how I feel about it. But overall, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And if any of these tech companies come down in price, they were already too high in my opinion. And I think they could use some pullbacks, and I think those would be great buying opportunities. And by the way, if Instagram gets pulled off of Facebook, I'll probably be buying Instagram stock because I think that would be a great stock. But anyway, or if YouTube came off of Google, I mean, there's so many different things that could happen. But either way, I just think with everything that we talked about in today's video, I think if you're a long-term investor and you're long-term optimistic, I think all of these things would result most likely in just buying opportunities. So I'm not very concerned about it myself. So I think there will probably be continued volatility. I think there will be volatility because we're still going into an election here. And like I said, there's still policy issues that we need to focus on with this election. So there's still a lot of things to focus on. There's a lot of things that could cause volatility in the stock market. But again, if you're a long-term optimist, I don't really see anything that just happened here recently. I don't see any of this as such a huge deal. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this update, and maybe I can do them more frequently for you guys if you did enjoy it. But hit the like button if you did, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.